Okay, I'll just give it another couple minutes and Sarah should be right on and then we can get started.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hi, Marie. Marie's with DC Socifem. I met her at the girls' night. Yeah. All right. Let's give it a few minutes because I think we'll have more people join us. But it's 8 o'clock now. So let's say that we'll start really talking at like 8:03, 8:04, or something like that.
This is not required, but just a reminder that this is going to be recorded. So if you don't want your last name out there, now's the time to change it.
Thank you for that reminder. You're also welcome to, if you don't want your face recorded, you can black out your photo, just turn your camera off. Yeah, change your name to whatever you want.
Hey, Kristen.
Hey Marie, I'm glad you could make it.
So I think we have pretty much our whole crew here. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started. I'm gonna do a brief introduction. Welcome to tonight's panel on universal childcare with the author of Birth Strike, Jenny Brown. My name is Sarah. I'm a public childcare worker and the co-chair of the New River Valley DSA in Southwest Virginia. For anyone unfamiliar, DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, is the largest socialist organization in the US. It is a place for like-minded socialists, communists, and anarchists of all stripes to unite together to organize for a better world. The way it works is you join a DSA chapter where you live, or you start one, and every month we meet with other organizers to make decisions democratically on what to organize and how to organize, and you form working groups within your chapter focused on specific issues. Our working group, Childcare for All, is looking to build out a public childcare system in Virginia that is play-based and run by workers and funded by a progressive income tax on the very rich. We came up with this idea after seeing the success of Portland DSA's Universal Preschool Now campaign, a direct ballot initiative that passed last November and will not only provide public childcare for all 3 and 4-year-olds in their country or county free of cost, but it's also finally going to provide childcare workers with a fair wage. Together, we have written a resolution at DSA's 2021 convention, number 23, Childcare for All, that would direct some of the money collected from dues-paying DSA members towards campaigns like Portland's Universal Preschool Now or Virginia's own Childcare for All. And we ask that all DSA members support our work and the rights of children at this convention. I'm very, very happy tonight to introduce our guest speaker, Jenny Brown. Jenny is the author of the phenomenal 2019 book, Birth Strike, The Hidden Fight Over Women's Reproductive Work, put out by PM Press. With her support, our chapter organized a reading group around the text, and we met for 3 sessions, each lasting an hour and a half. And that's because people wanted to stay over the hour. And it helped us raise awareness for why we need universal childcare right now. In our discussions, we heard from mothers who have struggled to pay for childcare and workers who have been horrifically exploited by the childcare system. And it strengthened our chapter's desire to organize around childcare as an issue in Virginia. I strongly urge all other DSA chapters to read this book together. I see Birth Strike as a now foundational text of proletarian feminism, and the same legacy of works like Sylvia Federici's Caliban the Witch, Maria Rosa Dalla Costa's Family Welfare and the State, and Angela Davis's Women, Class, and Race. On my second time reading Birth Strike for this reading group, I was surprised at how much I learned reading it again. I think this speaks more to Jenny Brown's strength as a writer and not how bad of a reader I am. As a core part of her thesis, Jenny Brown doesn't argue for a birth strike where women would stop reproducing until all our demands as mothers and workers are met, but she asserts instead that a birth strike is already happening. This strike is happening because we do not have childcare for all, Medicare for all, or paid family leave in the United States. And as a result, our birth rate is dropping. This slowdown of births has been further exacerbated by the pandemic when daycares and schools closed, forcing parents to leave the workforce and non-parents to really consider whether they can afford to bring children into this world at all. Some estimates put the birth rate decrease in 2020 alone at 8% from 2019. We have invited Jenny here tonight to answer a few lingering questions we have after reading this excellent book. The way this talk will work is I will first ask the questions, she will respond, and then we will open up Stack in the chat for a few comments and follow-up questions if there are any from our audience, before we move on to the next question for Jenny. If you want to get on Stack, please put your name in the chat and we will call on you when it is your turn. If you want to give an applause at any point, please do so by wiggling your fingers in the air like this, or doing a thumbs up emoji on your Zoom window. Before I ask the first question, I want to begin by thanking Jenny again and the National Women's Liberation for writing this book and for helping distribute this book to us and for fighting to raise consciousness on all these important issues. Thank you so much, Jenny. Let's practice our finger wiggles and thumbs up now. Yeah, good job. All right. Our first question, number 1. While reading Birth Strike, we noticed that you quote Judith Brown. And for anyone unfamiliar, this is on page 143. The quote is, if we reproduce the very workers we work with, who fills the slots emptied by the retiring, the very workers who help to supply us with food, housing, shelter, medical care, highways, services, art, history? Why aren't we paid for the production of reproduction? Since unions constantly seek better wages, better conditions for workers, pay for their production, why not for women for reproduction production? And so when I saw the name Judith Brown, I wondered first, Jenny, is she related to you? And if yes, could you tell us about your experience growing up with a feminist leader? And
no, unfortunately, I can't tell you about it because she's not related to me, but I did work with her from 85 to 91 when she died really closely in Gainesville, Florida. And she was involved in the same civil rights movement that my parents were involved in, in North Florida. So they actually knew each other. So yeah, but she's definitely my mom's age, but not my mom.
I was just a guess because of the last names. So how did you first get into organizing?
Let's see. I started out protesting first strike nuclear weapons and getting arrested in backcountry actions for that kind of stuff. And feminist stuff, trying to defend the revolutions in Central America against US attacks. Started a lefty monthly in Gainesville, Florida that I ran for as co-editor for like 25 years. Was a editor at Labor Notes for a few years. Tried to start a labor party in the 1990s with a bunch of people in the labor movement who were trying to start an independent politics, that would be for working people. That was like a 10-year project. And then in terms of feminism, you were asking about National Women's Liberation. We have kind of our roots in the 1960s women's liberation movement. But what we're most known for, so we started in 2009, but what we're most known for is trying to get the morning after pill over the counter, which was like a 10-year campaign, and which we actually finally won. Maybe the first thing where I've actually had, a concrete success in my political life. I mean, so that was really inspiring and I think is a good model for how to go about stuff where we actually, it was a very grassroots. We were told by all the liberals, oh, you can't demand that much. That's, it's just, it's going to be too hard. You should, just go for the morning after pill in hospital waiting rooms, or hospital emergency rooms, because that you might be able to win. And we totally ignored that. We were like, those of us who were raped did not go to emergency rooms, so that wouldn't help them. And then those of us who needed the pill, mostly it wasn't rape, so that wouldn't help us. So we did consciousness raising and figured out what we really wanted. And then went for that, and that was really popular. Not to mention that we kind of got lucky on the courts. The courts actually were sympathetic, but so that's a little bit of my background. And what NWL has been doing, so in addition to Birth Strike, we put out this book in the Jacobin series called Without Apology, which is about the history of the abortion struggle and what we think about it now. And we've been, so both of those books came out in 2019, and we have study groups for both books. When the pandemic hit, we were sort of knocked back to doing like study instead of a lot of action, but we did do a study group in addition to some history of sort of women's liberation, Black Power connections. We also did a study group on universal programs, universal versus means tested programs that you all actually might be interested. I could send you the syllabus. And several, we did a bunch of other studies. And in fact, we're doing one right now on transfeminism. So anyway, that's kind of what we've been up to in the last year. But we're looking forward to hitting the streets again.
Awesome. Does anyone have any questions about Jenny's response? Just add yourself on stack. Give it 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. So for our third question, I asked, in Birth Strike, we were shown that historically drops in the birth rate led to the tightening of restrictions on abortion and birth control. In 2020, the birth rate dropped even further. Yet we also see the Biden administration making moves to reverse the Hyde Amendment in their budget proposal. Since you're so familiar with what's going on in abortion activism, what do you think explains the shift?
Well, I mean, first of all, there's the political thing that Bernie shamed the Democratic Party into putting opposition to Hyde for the first time into the Democratic Party program, which we know isn't really worth the paper it's written on, but that is something. And the whole idea that Bernie was outflanking the supposedly more feminist candidates on this issue and had been against Hyde from its inception, I think really kind of forced the Democratic Party to. Now we'll see what actually happens, right, on reversing Hyde. That's been a 35-year struggle, and I would be very surprised if we win that. But the bigger question is like, why are they even making any moves? And I think there's like, the power structure generally has a couple of different responses to a dropping birth rate. So as we saw in Europe, especially like in Sweden, starting even in the 20s and 30s, when the birth rate drops, there's the idea of, oh, let's make it easier for families to have kids, right? And do some of the things that working class families need. Like, in the case of Sweden early on, they were like, oh, well, let's make maternity hospitals, let's make, paid leave, let's do some stuff like that. And then it later became more the wraparound services that we see in Scandinavia and other countries in Europe, and frankly, in a lot of other countries like Cuba. It's not just European countries. So that's one strategy. In the US, mostly we've seen, obviously, restrictions on abortion, birth control, lack of sex education, just basically coercion. But there has been, and my hope is that as we demand more and as the birth rate drops even further, that we'll actually have some leverage to demand some of the things. And I think that's actually happening. Like, I was astonished to see that Mitt Romney, when he was supporting this child allowance, basically, which was in a way more progressive than what Biden had proposed. It was more universal. But the reasoning he gave was, oh, well, we have to get the birth rate up, which I thought was a curious little bit of honesty because usually they don't talk about that. They don't want to make it sound like they're forcing people to have more kids, because that just sounds, it sounds like Nazis. But the other thing is that I think the Democrats, to some extent, have settled on immigration as the solution to the employer's dilemma on the birth rate, right? And this is not to say that they want immigrants to have rights, mind you, because they want immigrants to not have rights but be here, and then they can misuse their labor. But the advantage for the ruling class of immigrants is that the employers here never had to pay any money into education or healthcare or anything, right? So it's basically a ripoff of Mexico or the DR or whatever, all the families in there and the state there who have raised people to adulthood through their own resources, and then US employers get that. So I think that's one of the things that's going on. And then the Republicans sort of have this idea that, well, if we could have more white babies, then maybe we could like continue to trick the white working class into voting for us. And so that's the sort of that's their kind of political calculus. And then of course you have like the evangelical Christian right wingers wanting people to have more babies to just grow their political, but of course their problem is that a lot of those kids are going to turn out to be rebels. So, and I know a lot of people who grew up in evangelical families who are, actually want a revolution instead. So, so that might be a flaw in their logic, but that's up to us to organize those people, right? So I think that's kind of the balance at what the different factions of the ruling class are thinking about right now.
Absolutely. And we also saw China lift their one-child policy this year to make it a two-child policy. And for the explicit reason of increasing the birth rate in China so that they can have a larger, workforce base to support their programs as well. I'm going to open up Stack. Does anyone have any comments that they want to say or responding questions? Hazel, go ahead.
Oh, can you guys hear me? Nope.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Thank you for being here with us this evening. I really appreciate it. You had mentioned Mitt Romney. Do you see, I think a lot of us were shocked by, or maybe it was just me, by him coming out and talking about that type of funding. Do you think that's an indication that this is the time to apply pressure and we could actually make something happen?
Yeah, I mean, I was just as shocked as you were, I'm sure. Yeah, I think it actually shows that, yeah, this is a good time. And we've seen it, I mean, not just Portland, but there are a lot of little initiatives and people are making headway where they didn't before on getting, universal pre-K. Like New York started with a sort of it was like ramp up to universal pre-K, and it was started being sort of means tested, and now it's universal pre-K, and now we're struggling to get 3K to not be this means tested freaking nightmare. There was an article in the Times about how everybody, like they closed the offices where you could apply, and now a bunch of childcare centers are closing because they don't have any students because the state is not dispensing the money. And it's just proof why a universal program is so much better. But anyway, so I think that like we made more progress in the last 3 or 4 years than on that and paid parental leave than we had in the last 20. Sure. I mean, so I really think that it is a moment to make some of these demands. And of course, the other thing is like, Bernie, AOC, DSA, all of the candidates that we were running in various places, all the tax the rich campaigns, and as I understand it, the Portland thing came out of it was a committee of the tax the rich effort that they were doing there. So all of that, and pointing to like we now have no less than 3 billionaires starting their own space programs, right? So it's just like the whole Gilded Age thing of Bezos, everybody, I think consciousness is higher about the concentration of wealth. So just basically because of our organizing. So I think those are also factors. Yeah, I mean, Romney's interesting because, maybe his constituency of partly being a Mormon, he just wants money to go to families because that's gonna like, I don't know exactly what's going on with that. But I do, generally, the right is more interested in getting cash benefits than a universal program because it's easier to take away cash benefits or modify them, or you can just let inflation whittle them away even. So like you notice that neither party is really standing behind an idea like a universal public childcare system, which is you know, what obviously what most of us would be for, and what I think, you know, what Bernie was putting in his platform, and a lot of us say, oh, that would be the gold standard. Obviously, local initiatives are like good ways to like build up some initiative for a federal system, and that would ultimately be what we want. But yeah, so I hope I answered the question.
Absolutely. Yeah, will link the New York Times article that you mentioned in the YouTube video for this, because it's a really good description of how messed up vouchers programs are because of the way they just put families through hurdle after hurdle when like working families don't have the time for this type of mess. Like they need universal childcare now. Kristen, you're next on stack. Unmute.
I'm eating, so that's why I turned off my video. But first of all, thanks, Sarah, for hosting this. Thank you, Jenny, for joining us. It was a great book and a great discussion. So I guess this is sort of a comment, but I'll try and make it into a question, or I would just be curious about your response. So for a little while, I've been following some of the moderates and even center-right or right-leaning folks here in DC, think tanks, and some of the members of Congress and thought leaders and whatever. And there has been a shift in recent years to some of them supporting childcare, and it's crazy, it's insane, and it was shocking to me. I kind of didn't believe it. I will say that it's a small group. And what one of the things that sort of forms their framework of thinking is actually sort of anti-libertarian, like just how the left, people in the Democratic Party are sick of the libertarians. The kind of mainstream Republican Party is also sick of the libertarians. And some of that is they really feel that there are people there that really do believe, in the family, and what they agree with some of us on the left that have been saying for years that, if you support families and you support childcare, you should support all this stuff. There's actually some that, now or probably more recently are starting to believe that. So, and the one, so American Enterprise Institute is one of the big ones, I think, that has sort of advanced any kind of childcare support. They're now, I guess, like the moderate and corporatist voice or something, I don't know, but it is very much, it's not universal pre-K. Usually, like there was a hearing like 8 months ago on it, and then one of the AEI people were there, and they said that what the proposal they were advancing was basically families, young families would get an advance from their Social Security check is basically what they were advancing. So they get an advance on that now, but then I guess, down the road when they're old, they'll figure it out then. So, that was one of the proposals they put forward. And then, like how Capitol Hill works, that the Democrats all end up jumping on that proposal, and then that's the Democratic platform, and then it gets pulled even further right. So, but anyway, that's kind of what I've seen. There's a few senators. One of them was Mitt Romney. I feel like there was a couple others, you know, I think like Murkowski and Susan Collins, like the moderates have signaled some support. So I don't know. I guess was curious as to your thoughts about like how we should respond to machinations on Capitol Hill, which is basically just like Obamacare. So basically, you know, you take the Republican idea and then it's gutted further, and then we spend all political capital trying to get that across or you know, are we in a new place now? We've got the Democratic Socialists, we've got the AOCs in Congress. Like, I don't know. Anyway, that's my brain dump, and I'd love to hear some of your thoughts.
So there's, I mean, you're absolutely right. There's this whole group that call themselves reformicons. So it's like Marco Rubio, Mike Lee, Mitt Romney. They're Russ Douthat, the guy who writes for the Times, is sort of one of their thought leaders, if you can call it thought. And their whole thing is we have to win back the working class to the Republicans. We're just going to lose them. Now, of course, this was before Trump, right? But we have to win back the working class. So we have to throw something to families. So let's do these tiny little like child allowances or little cash benefits or something where we can prove that we really care about the little people. And so there's that part. And usually it takes the form of these, like you say, voucher programs or some way that it would somehow support private enterprise somehow, right? So public money that would eventually, I mean, we would just have to then turn over to some private enterprise, as opposed to a national thing. And I think, I mean, I do think that this is all because of the birth rate plunge. I think that's why but they do not by any means have supremacy within the Republican Party. So they would have to ally with some portion of the Democrats if they wanted to get something to happen. The advance from the Social Security check was just unbelievably evil because the idea there is, oh, we get a 2-for-1. We can encourage people to have kids and we can undermine Social Security, right? So, which has been their dream forever. I mean, I write about it in the book, all the different times, and you know, we're probably going to face another attack here soon. So, so their dream is to undermine Social Security. Well, what better way to do that than to have people get an advance on it, right? And then their Social Security is going to be less when they actually get it. But it puts even more of the burden on parents who are already the ones who are spending all the money and time raising kids, right? So it's just, you know, it should be, the general funds should be going towards this, not making parents pay in more, like pay in later. And I think it's part of their whole idea. We need to force things back into the family. So the idea would be, you raise the kid and then the kid has to support you the way it was in the old days before Social Security. Your only survival ability when you got old was to have your kids support you. And if you didn't have any kids, you were, you know, going to live in the poorhouse. So, so that's kind of their strategy. Now, the American Enterprise Institute video was really interesting because, of course, we know the American Enterprise Institute like is a big promoter of capitalism. They're whatever's good for corporations, right? So they obviously have calculated that some kind of childcare would be good for corporations on some various levels. But the way, I didn't get to watch the whole thing. I watched the first two speakers, and the intro and the first two speakers, but it was interesting that they were sort of attacking the Swedish system for not having a cash payment, for withdrawing their cash payment to parents. And they were like, oh, the pressure, this is so terrible for families. But so it was like sort of subtly undermining the universal part of it at the same time as saying, yeah, there should be some kind of childcare, but like, we don't want that, you know, that sort of hegemonic idea that women should work and there's all this peer pressure to put your kids in childcare and like 95% uptake, right? So I'm, you know, obviously I'm a little suspicious of what AI is doing there. And I think that basically they're trying to sort of tip the balance towards this cash payment idea. So each family would get a voucher or even like a weekly payment, and then either take care of the kid at home, one of the parents stays home and doesn't go to work, or go out onto the private market with this whatever $110 a week, haha, and try to find childcare. And then of course, if you have more money, you can subsidize it. If you don't have more money, then you're going to get like the really underfunded, underpaid childcare workers with the big turnover and, you know, no money to upgrade the space or have nice things. I mean, it just creates this tiered system where once again, it's like, it's how you pay cash. So that's my guess about what they're doing there. And, you know, countervailingly, we would want a universal system like public schools where there's plenty of funding and the workers are unionized and have a good rate of pay and all the stuff that Portland tried to put in their bill.
Yeah, it's funny. We have a question that mentions the AEIP in like 2 questions from now. So we'll get to that more. Lauren, you're on stack now, and I'm going to close stack after Lauren.
Yeah, I guess I kind of have a question, and I think we can probably talk about this later in response to Kristen talking about why Republicans care about childcare. I actually would challenge it and think when I've worked with Republicans and trying to pass childcare related bills, a lot of the times it's been about the return on investment and the economics like argument, and it has nothing to do with the family. I think that's kind of rooted in the fact that they could care less about what low-income family or giving low-income families and working families the option to have a family member stay at home. And they're more worried about having low-income workers to fill those positions. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, because when I've worked with, we worked with like a Washington Republican representative, I can't remember her name, but it was all about getting families to work. And I think COVID has really emphasized that argument, that childcare has nothing to do with families. It has to do with, and you argue this in your book, it has to do with workers, right? Yeah, Kristen, no, I don't think you fell for it, but I think that like, I would just say that I like in every childcare place I've worked, or it's always been bipartisan in our argument for Republicans when we put together materials and resources. So it's always been, how much money can you get for every dollar you invest in childcare? They don't care about family. They don't care about if families have choices or if families can have a parent stay home.
Oh yeah, definitely. I definitely agree that the underlying thing here and why these reformicons, I mean, there's the political sort of calculus of trying to get people to vote for them. But then there's the main thing is what AI is doing is like, how can we have childcare that basically allows us to have a bigger supply of workers right now? Yeah, right. Yeah, no, absolutely. That's the underlying thing that's causing the whole shift. And you know, people are made unreliable by not having reliable childcare, right? I mean, we know this from our own experience. So so definitely, and I would make a distinction between like the think tanks and the higher up Republicans and your average state senator who actually does want to do something, even if they're a Republican, but they want to do something for the businesses that are basically their sponsors in the legislature.
So for our next question, we're bringing it back to the Biden administration again. We are also seeing news that the Biden administration may attempt to expand preschool to cover 3- and 4-year-olds. Children ages 0 to 2.9 will still be using private daycares that are subsidized, and childcare workers will potentially be given a $15 an hour minimum raise. What do you think of the American Families Plan? And do you think 3- and 4-year-olds should be in school? Or what other alternatives do you envision?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have kids, so I asked a bunch of people who were involved in making the book, this question about the 3 and 4-year-olds being in school, including a couple childcare teachers, several parents of young kids, and pretty much in terms of like they would like to have 2 years paid leave at least, and then along around 3, it seems like it would be great to just have a universal system, but a couple people mentioned, you know, shorter work days, and I, you know, and in a couple of places in Europe, you get a 6-hour day until your kid's 7 type deal, and you take a pay cut, but you know, whatever. So like a couple of people mentioned that as like a good option, but the other thing that came up a lot is just shorter work hours overall. Everybody wants shorter work hours overall. I mean, everyone, you know, like the whole idea of one of the childcare teachers said, well, you know, the kids get dropped off and it's like an hour before work, and then when they get picked up, it's like an hour after work because of the New York crazy commute times. And so like the parents are working an 8-hour day, the kids are working a 10-hour day, the childcare teachers are working a, you know, incredible amount, and it's not good for anybody. Nobody wants this. Nobody wants to be at work that long. The kids should not be like having 10-hour. It's just like, how do you deal with that? And the problem is, like in New York, our pre-K is, I think, 6 hours and 15 minutes. So like, what do you do about the other 2.5 to 3 hours so then people are scrambling to either pay for that, which, what the fuck, or, excuse me, I hope there are no kids around, or you're, you know, you're staggering your work schedules, or you're just like juggling, you know, roping other family members into doing the pickups, or like, you know, bridging an hour here and then there's some after school thing. It's just like a fucking nightmare. So that's, I think the whole question of the shorter work week, I think, is something that we should be starting to really agitate on, because, and this COVID period, I think, is like people realize, you know, some people didn't have to commute. A lot of people still had to commute. But you could see that like the work hours were just ridiculous and unsustainable. And it just, we got to start talking about that. And of course, as soon as you start talking about shorter work week, people are like, well, fuck, I can't even survive on the hours I'm getting. How am I going to live with less hours? I'm looking for more overtime, duh. So you have to deal with the wages question and like that, and make sure that it's, you know, 6-hour day for 8 hours pay, or just make sure that everybody's getting $15 to $20 an hour, so that they're not constantly trying to add in extra jobs. Because great, I got a 6-hour work day here, but now I'm going to take a job on the weekend, you know. So it just, that just gives me more time to work more so that I can survive, you know. So we've got to think about how all these things fit together. And I think the thing that I really think is a pretty good plan overall is the People Policy Project Family Fun Pack, what it's called. And the way they do it in there is you have like what Sweden had. Of course, in Sweden, you have a lot of paid leave to begin with, but in the Family Fun Pack, I believe it's maybe 7 months of paid leave, and then you could be paid. You could either get like $120 a week to do the childcare yourself, or you can put the kid into the public free childcare up until like age 3.5, and then after that, it's the subsidy goes away, and there's free public childcare for 3 and 4-year-olds. So that seems like a pretty good, like sort of what most people would like to do, like that, like along about age 3, okay, you know, a little more independence, the kids a little bit more confident being in a group, it's a little bit less wrenching to leave them. It's a good time for them to make friends. It's like, instead of like this craziness where we, you know, are putting our kids in childcare after 6 weeks because we have to go back to work. So, you know, and then people could kind of flex it a little bit, you know, there's like a half-year kind of window there. So that's that. I don't know. I would be interested in what people and you all think about that particular question. Yeah.
Sure, and I'm opening up Stack now, but I'll respond really quickly. I think from a childcare worker perspective, I also really want a shorter work week. I think we should aim for Virginia, for childcare workers, a 30-hour work week that pays $30 an hour, because that gives you like a pretty decent basic income. And the other thing is too, like these after school programs, they're not free, and they should be. Like what happened for where I live is, like, I was working in a public after school program that during the pandemic was extended to 12 hours a day. It was like an emergency daycare, but really there was no resources. It was the school was putting in like the same like zero amount of money that they would put into the after school program that's normally only a couple hours a day. But they just like extended it, and they're like, oh, here you are. And it made me realize like that, first of all, like by having a cost, it was excluding a lot of like working class children, of color, especially. And like their parents, like they needed that sort of resource during the pandemic, but they just weren't given it because it was inaccessible because of the fee. And it wasn't even that expensive. It was just like having a cost at all makes it a privilege, right? So Hazel, you're on Stack.
I have a lot of thoughts, which I know that Sarah knows, and probably a couple other people. I have a lot of thoughts about how childcare works in the US, and when we look at globally, how just far off the mark that we are. And that's something that I think that pushing toward childcare for all is the thing that opens up a lot of the other discussions about the length of the work week and how much you're paid and that kind of thing. Because at this point, when you say we should have a shorter work week so we can spend more time with our family, the immediate thought is, if I have fewer hours, there's no way I can cover childcare. It would be pointless for me to work, and I have to work. And it turns into that circular logic. So when we have that safety net of childcare for all, it makes these other discussions possible that at this point do seem impossible to a whole lot of people.
That's a great point.
So let's go on to our next question. So we've kind of talked about this already, but in November of last year, Portland DSA successfully passed a ballot measure that would instate a progressive income tax to fund public childcare for 3- and 4-year-olds in their county. In your research, have you found any other organizers pushing for universal childcare in the US? And do you think childcare should be funded through a progressive income tax? Also, do you think statewide campaigns do you think a statewide campaign would be viable where you live? Or do you think a federal national campaign like the People's Policy Project puts forth is more viable?
Well, there was that attempt in Kansas City where the mayor really pushed for it, and then basically the school board and everybody went up against him, and it was like a 3/8 cent sales tax he was going to fund it with. And it was like the opposite picture of like Portland, where it's grassroots, ground up, like building the coalitions and making it happen. It was like sort of a top down, like this would be a great idea, why doesn't everybody support it? And he got a lot of pushback, and so it failed. But but I think there are quite a few campaigns. I've heard actually more in the last few years, campaigns on paid leave. So like Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York have all got California all got some version of paid leave, which we didn't have any of that before. And those, interestingly, were successful on the state level. The ones that I'm familiar with on childcare have been city or county wide, a big metropolitan area. And I'll just tell you, in New York State, it would be really tough to win something statewide. We were able to get it in the city basically because the mayor has control of that sort of part, but the governor is much more right-wing. The legislature, despite the fact we have a pretty good crop of assembly members, DSA assembly members, and 2 state senators who are DSA, it's harder to get it through us on the state level. So I'm the ones I'm aware of are not statewide, although the paid leave ones are statewide. So that might be something to think about how to do that. Yes, absolutely. I mean, it has to be tax the rich. I think one of the weaknesses of the sales tax argument, even though it was only 3/8 of a cent, they use the argument, well, this hits, and it does, it's regressive. The mayor said, well, what's regressive is child poverty and not having childcare, but it didn't, the funding, like, we have to make it a part of, like, we're in a new Gilded Age. There is so much money sloshing around at the top, they can't even, like, keep it from us. And it's just unbelievable the amount of money at the top, and we need to slosh some of that back down and actually get, drain the swamp. So that, I think those are a couple of areas we should think about.
Awesome. I don't even think I'd heard about the Kansas. I'll have to look it up. Lauren, you're on staff.
Sorry, I have lots of just thoughts, and I just am very excited to have you here, Jenny, because I have lots of thoughts. So I guess one thing I am really interested in, and I wonder if the people you've talked to write your book have talked about this at all. I know and I think that the Swedish people were actually, this was part of what their argument was the schoolification of young children. And I'm a strong advocate that why would I put 3 and 4-year-olds in a public school system that is failing 5 through 18-year-olds? But I've also found in my work that the teachers unions have been actually a point of, unfortunately, resistance, because they want the money for universal pre-K, but they don't want to see themselves as babysitters, or they don't want to see themselves as equal. Like, they don't want childcare to be equal to them because they've had to fight so hard to be seen as professionals and be paid in a professional way. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that schoolification, because it's been really frustrating as someone who's very pro teachers unions, like was raised by a teacher, to hear the arguments of teachers over COVID, especially being like, well, we're not babysitters. And the answer is actually school is a form of childcare, and how maybe we can not schoolify 3 and 4-year-olds like we have in DC, but still find common ground with teachers unions. And I know some childcare providers have unionized, but that has been a struggle in a lot of places because there have been a lot of right-wing opposition to that.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, organizing childcare teachers have this big obstacle to unionizing, which is you've got the small workplace, right? So that's very difficult. And friends of mine who tried just got fired, so that was, but if you have a lot of state money going in, then you do have a chance, and that's worked in a couple places. On the professional thing, it's so annoying because part of what, childcare teachers are professionals. They're the lowest paid professionals in the freaking country. And this whole idea, everybody's sort of trying to divide themselves off from, oh, those are babysitters and whatever. So the thing is to make the argument that childcare teachers are professionals, not that teachers are babysitters. Although I get your point about it is childcare, right? That's what all schooling is childcare in terms of so and then the other pernicious thing that happens is because childcare teachers are trying to get more respect as professionals and pay, right? it all becomes about the credentialing and this and that. But the problem is, if you're a childcare teacher and you go get credentialed, then you got some school debt, and then you can't afford to be a childcare teacher anymore. So that happens a lot. And the whole solution has to be that we have to see ourselves as all working class, right? So it's part of getting teachers unions to get rid of this sort of professionally mindset, which you see a lot in nursing unions. You see it a lot in some higher education unions, and you see it, anywhere that people can kind of be divided as a professional. Sometimes public employee unions like divided. Oh, those are the janitorial workers. We're the clerical workers, right? And the way to fix a lot of that is to get everybody in the same union. So in school systems where you have the clerical, janitorial, building, everybody's all in the same union, then you work that stuff out within the union, and like the clerical workers and the janitorial workers have to, this is I was in an Ask Me local that had everybody in the same union. There are little conflicts, but it's all kind of within the union, and you realize, okay, these are our brothers and sisters. If we don't all stick together, we're not going to get anything. So we got to make everybody happy. And so that's one thing. But we do have these problems with the teachers union. Obviously, part of it is going to be that the childcare teachers have to be in the union. They can't be like a separate section or a separate union, and that's, I think, where you end up with these gradations. So that's a thought on that. And then the professionalization thing is all about, and like kindergarten went back and forth and has gone back and forth. I'm sure you're aware. Like at first it was all, kindergarten is for kids to sort of explore and grow gardens and learn, all the gifts and learn about all the shapes and sing and all this stuff. And then it became, oh, well, the justification for having kindergarten is that they'll do better in first grade, they'll do better in second grade, right? And then it was like, oh, we need to teach them to read in kindergarten. And then it became insane. And all this age inappropriate shit where they're testing high stakes testing in kindergarten. It's just like, no, this is wrong. So, but it's partly because they're trying to get, the professionalization comes with the pay, and the legitimacy comes with the professionalization, and all of this classist crap, right? Where all of these workers are not being respected. And by respect, we mean money, right? So if you've got as you say, a $30 an hour wage floor, then a lot of that will not be an issue, right?
That was such an excellent response, and I agree with all of it. Yeah, it was just put out recently that Governor Newsom, he's expanding pre-K to the thing called TK to include 4-year-olds, but he wants to have 4-year-olds have 4 hours a day of education, which is insane, right? You can't have a 4-year-old learning for 4 hours. That's not even fair for the 4-year-old, especially because we know that the biggest predictor for child success is actually, it's not their IQ or any standardized test that you can give them. The best measurement is whether or not during their childhood, they actually formed solid attachments with their caregivers and their parents. So if we actually have stable wages for childcare workers, we would create stable people who are more likely to succeed in high school and graduate and go on to join the workforce. I also really liked what you said against the tiered wage system in the school system, because it appears in the unions, especially in Virginia, we have the largest teachers union. The teachers union here is the largest union. But when I first joined, it was confusing because I was like, okay, I make $12 an hour. How am I supposed to pay this teachers union fee? But if you apply to the union, you can actually apply for a tiered wage to get into the union. So if you're a childcare worker listening to this, you should still try and join your union. And try and reform it from the inside. Look at the way the West Virginia teacher strike happens. They formed a core of organizers, and they were trying to abolish the tiered wage system within the public schools, which is pretty inspiring because all of our childcare aides, our special needs aides, our janitors, and our cafeteria ladies, they're making $10, $12 an hour, while teachers are outsourcing that labor to an underclass. And I think kids are internalizing it too. I think kids understand that there's a class being created within the school system, that the school systems are creating poverty. So yeah, I was really impressed by your answer there. For our next question, we have, okay, we kind of talked about this a little already, but I want to come back to it. One aspect of Swedish universal childcare that really appealed to some of us was the cash for care subsidy offered to stay-at-home parents. And this was mentioned in your book. However, this cash for care subsidy was taken away in 2016 because it wasn't deemed gender equal. Do you think we should offer cash for care subsidy in the US, even if an unintended consequence is that it ends up encouraging more women to be stay-at-home mothers?
Yeah, I think there's a sort of a hidden reality in Sweden, which is that is partly a racist thing where they don't want immigrants to get money to keep their kids at home because then they won't be socialized into the Swedish system and blah, blah, blah. So I rather suspect that this gender equality thing was kind of a red herring. So we have to keep that in mind, right? Little intersectionality there. But I think in the US case where we're trying to ramp this up, I mean, the real reason, right, that women stay home is because they generally are the ones that make, in a heterosexual couple, they're generally the ones that are making less money. So so like that's an equal pay issue, it's not really based on the you know, the subsidy. The subsidy isn't like less if it's the woman staying home than if it's the man. But when you make the decision as a family who can stay home, obviously you're gonna forego the lower paycheck. So so that's like another part of it that has to be. And I think in our situation, yeah, up to like 3 years old, because we should have paid leave, right? Up to, you know, we should have 2 years of paid leave. But because we don't have 2 years of paid leave, we should probably have some kind of cash for care subsidy, at least up to 2.5, 3. That's the sort of the family fun pack thing. And, you know, and that gives families a little more flexibility. You know, just the problems of I'm sort of against like this cash thing because they usually like when like, okay, it was like $110 a week and now it's the equivalent of $50 a week and it's really not something that you could stay, you know. So we got to be aware of that, and if there is such a thing, it has to have an escalator clause and make sure, and in the family fun pack he makes that point, or they make that point. So yeah, I guess that's the answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, does anyone want to go on staff? Okay. Lauren, go ahead.
I think that even though I did some research into those groups that those women from the AEI session, and I'm like, I probably don't agree with these people like on anything, but I do think that like the idea that we have to like decouple our value from our ability to contribute to society through employment. And I think stay-at-home parenting is like a way to do that, and that like you are contributing to society, but in a different way, and that should be valued. So I guess, yeah, I that's just all I had to say. I was talking to you about this, but I don't know. I just think that like being a stay-at-home parent should not, the argument for gender equality should not be like, well, people can't stay at home, right? Like that's just a faulty argument, because that's not true. Gender equality would be that people make the choice that's best for them and that they want what they want to do. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, so if you look at how the family wage developed in the post-war period, right? You actually had, ideally, obviously for non-unionized workers and a lot of people it didn't work out. But the ideal was one job would support two people, two adults, and however many kids they had, right? One job, 40 hours. So what would gender equality be with that? Two jobs at 20 hours a week, right? 40 hours, we're giving 40 hours to the employer, no more. The whole family is gonna just give 40 hours to the employer. So, so we've lost 40 hours or more, if we're working more hours than 40, which most of us are, we've lost 40 hours a week out of our family time budget. No wonder we're going crazy, right? So like to get back to that, you know, we should have 20 hours a week. We should split it however we want. It could, you know, whichever person or both of us working. And obviously in cases where there's just one custodial parent, it should only be a 20-hour week. I mean, I just think that that should be kind of the goal. And I do think that, you know, it is probably possible if we had decent paid leave and child subsidies and child tax credits and subsidies to make it work for even currently for one parent. But I think the goal is that we should be able to work if we want to, and we should not be desperate if we can't find work. And that goes to like, why don't we have a guaranteed annual income? Instead, we have these horrible punitive welfare system and a, you know, unemployment that runs out almost immediately. So that's the other part of it, is like, why are we, you know, they're doing everything they can to make sure that we are at work on Monday morning and not anywhere else, right? I mean, that's the whole goal of our economic system. So we're really thinking about like some pretty basic stuff there.
Those are really good points, especially that we've lost 40 hours to the employer because of the two family. Yeah, I'm gonna remember that one. For our next question, we kind of wanted to move over to talking about abortion access and birth control. Although our working group is focused on universal childcare, we are also, of course, interested in struggling for reproductive justice. So what do you think organizers and groups like DSA who support abortion access and birth control access should be fighting for right now? And what kind of campaigns have you seen that other groups should imitate?
Oh, wow. Well, I think one thing that has happened a lot and is happening even more is because of the desperate situation, especially in the South. I'm from Florida. It's just a lot of the organizing has sort of become the mutual aid, getting money for abortion funds, setting up abortion funds, contributing to where you can now in a lot of states get abortion pills online legally, at least for the duration of the pandemic. We'll see how long, and like, so raising money for that. So I think, you know, that's sort of consciousness raising, and it feels like you're doing something, but I think for the effort that we're making, we could really be fighting more publicly and not sort of falling back to, we have to do everything ourselves. And so that's that's one thought. The other thing is that I think it's a pretty exciting front to be fighting on, getting the abortion pill more widely available, even though we have to defend the clinics. We have to, you know, we still, we have this opening because of the technology of the abortion pill. Lots of people are doing at-home abortions now. It is the main way that people are doing underground and illegal abortions. And it's not that expensive. Like right now, it's one of the big sites, Abortion on Demand. You can get a legal prescription. You consult with a doctor, you get a legal prescription. It's $239, and they're kicking money back to the clinics, the independent clinics, out of that money. So basically it's a site run partly by the independent clinics. It's called abortionondemand.org. But that is sort of a duration of the pandemic thing, that it's going to be available, and it's only available in states that haven't already outlawed telemedicine abortions. So that leaves out a bunch of the South, a little bunch of the Midwest. The FDA is going to reconsider whether or not the abortion pill. There's a whole story around this. When the abortion pill first got approved by the FDA in 2000, it was on the strength that it would be just as expensive and difficult to get as an abortion procedure. So they, what they did is they slapped this thing called REMS, which stands for Risk Evaluation and Mitigation Strategy, which is basically the thing the FDA does when you have a really dangerous experimental drug that they want to track, like a experimental cancer drug or something that could kill you or it could help you. And so they put the abortion pill into this category. And that means that you cannot get a prescription, or up until the FDA suspended their rules for the pandemic, you couldn't get a prescription from your regular pharmacy. You had to go to a clinic or hospital. They had to have a relationship with the supplier. You had to put your name as a doctor on a public list so that the anti-abortion assassins could easily find you. You have to sign stuff saying you understand it's dangerous, and they have to do a certification, and it's just a bunch of crap, right, that you have to go through to get the abortion pill. And if the REMS were taken off of it, which all of the big gynecological and doctors groups say should be done, it would then become something, it would get it out of the clinic or hospital setting, and you could basically go to a doctor and get a prescription, or call a doctor on the phone who is sympathetic. And you can imagine that there would be networks of gynecologists who would be willing to consult on the phone, as long, or a consultative person. But anyway, it would really wreck the right-wing strategy of killing off the clinics to prevent us from getting our reproductive rights. So I think that's an interesting angle on it, and the FDA is going to be reconsidering those rules. So I think that's a place where we could put some effort in, and that's one of the things National Women's Liberation is working on. Like, what's the best leverage point? When we did the morning after pill thing, we did a bunch of stuff. We gave it out. We made a bunch of we faxed from every state. We faxed people saying, I will give my friend the morning after pill. We sat in front of the FDA. We testified before their hearing. We unrolled a scroll of all the different countries that already had it approved. I mean, we just raised a lot of hell. And so I think this is a good moment to do that. And it has sort of a little bit of a mutual aid thing, because one of the things that's been going on is we're studying, they're studying how it works in a non-clinical setting. And the more data they get, the more ammunition they have to prove that it's fine. There was a long study that I think just ended, called Teleabortion. And then what's going on right now under the pandemic is they're collecting data from this. So spread the word that this is a somewhat inexpensive way to get a medically supervised at-home abortion. If you have any problems, somebody's there on the phone with you. So that's one of the things we're doing, spreading the word about that. I mean, there's a bunch of other stuff that could be done around the Supreme Court, all the standard stuff of marching and protesting and, projecting male chauvinist pigs on the side of the Supreme Court, whatever, all that stuff we could do too. But I think the abortion bill is sort of a sleeper issue right now. We could do more on.
Perfect. I think DSA is a great organization to mass mobilize over something like lobbying for access to the abortion pill, especially now that we know that it's safe. It seems like a great opportunity for our organization. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, and I should say about a third of abortions in the US are using the pill over the last 20 years, and it's extremely safe. It's, you know, as safe as any medical procedure can be. Yeah.
Unless anyone's on stack, I'm going to move on to the next question. Anyone? Nope. Okay. So this is kind of a broad one. Organizing can sometimes be emotionally fraught, mentally exhausting, and difficult to sustain. Did you face anything like that in your successful campaign for birth control access or the morning after pill? If not, how did you avoid it? And what advice do you have for new organizers?
Oh, wow. Well, everybody always tells you it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, and which is annoying. I think it's a little more like a relay in the sense that when we were working, so any campaign has ups and downs, and you have to take a rest occasionally. That's really important. You know, there'll be times where you have to mobilize really hard, and then there'll be times where you can like sit back and analyze and just rest and like do your laundry and stuff. So I think I think that's natural, and you shouldn't feel like, oh, we got to be doing everything all the time. But also making sure you bring 2 or 3 people when you go do anything so they learn, really working hard to make roles for people so they feel like they're making a contribution, and really are making a contribution, not bullshit roles, but and really just creating a team. And I think it's really important, just our experience with COVID, to have like face-to-face interactions, because it can get so cold, and people, it's almost as bad as email, Zoom, you know. I mean, my choir had a faction split during COVID, right? Because we weren't meeting face to face, so we couldn't talk it through. So we just got mad at each other. I mean, everybody was having faction splits. I don't know if you, but if you can believe it. So I think it's really important to have face to face as much as possible, and you know, giving each other the benefit of the doubt, obviously, and not like, you know, just assuming the worst ever of your comrades. I think a lot of that comes through the sort of the Zoom gotcha social media type thing that, you know, clicks, likes, everybody's looking for the angle, and it's sort of infests our brain. So when we're organizing, we have to like get out of that mode and think about the other human beings that we're working with, and assume that they want freedom and a just world the way we do. And you know, if they misgender somebody or do something that's stupid, you know, just move on, you know, and have a lot of love for each other. So there's that. And so I guess the other thing is just, you know, remember that anything that we won in history, anything that we got in history that's good, some organizer somewhere, some group of organizers, some group, you know, band of merry people struggled for it. We didn't get anything by like the kings giving it to us, the employers giving it to us, the government giving, I mean, all of that was struggles, and they lie about it all the time. So in history, you never hear, I mean, we do our own histories, right? But in the mainstream history, you never hear about it. The Supreme Court gave us abortion, or, you know, whatever it is. And so just remember that they're always lying about how things changed. And when you get discouraged, you can think about, well, we know how things changed. They changed because we changed them. It's not because some benevolent dictator suddenly took it in their heart to change it. So somewhere in that history, we are in this in this long relay of freedom fighting people that are making a just world. So you're a part of that, and you're passing on your strength and your knowledge and your energy to the next generation, and that, you know, it's the best way to live. So I think that also is important to keep us going.
Thank you so much for that advice. That was really excellent. Yeah, and Eric had the Frederick Douglass quote in the chat. If there is no struggle, there is no progress, which is totally true. And we have at least we have our comrades in our relay with us, helping us struggle. So we have 2 more questions that were added on during this. Do you have time to take them? I know it's been an hour. Cool.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So next we have, okay, so I'm gonna do, okay. Are you at all concerned with the connection between people's concerns with birth rates and nationalism?
Absolutely. So this is a thing I try to go through pretty in a lot of detail in the book. But it's, and I mentioned that my suspicion about Sweden. And you know, I have a friend who's of Pakistani descent who lives in Denmark, and you know, the Danes and the Swedes may be good on some stuff, but the race stuff, they are terrible. It's really, really awful. So yeah, so the main, I think the main thing to think about here is that the Republicans are looking at Texas and California as like the future. Both states are majority people of color, right? At this point. And in Texas, they've been able to gerrymander and, you know, basically suppress the vote and keep people from being, getting any of the things that they need, using white supremacy, using, you know, basically trying to make white people think that they have an interest with these white people who are in the legislature because you're both white, and like creating that sort of white identity. And so part of our struggle is for us to see ourselves as a working class that's a multiracial working class that's not like that the race of the people at the top is not the determinative thing. And in California, by contrast, California is not a paradise, but they did manage to, you know, pass a higher minimum wage. They've managed to get through a lot of stuff. There's a lot of more unionization than Texas. And that is partly because of various, basically the Latino voting bloc getting really well organized. There's a whole history of that. And then a lot of, in Northern California, a lot of other organizing, especially by Asian and Pacific Island people. So there's a whole, there, and they don't, you know, the Republicans and the corporate Democrats are scared to death of that coalition making those laws, making unionization legal, essentially, because it's really almost impossible to organize in the private sector these days. So so that whole effort, part of why they you know, and I think this is true of Mitt Romney and Mike Lee and all these reformicons we were talking about earlier, they want white babies. That's what they're going for. And you know, and they want them because, not because they love white people. They don't love working class white people. But they love to manipulate working class white people, and it's very effective in the US because of white supremacy and our racial history and the way that the history has been used. So so that's their kind of goal, and our obviously our answer is that we have to unite as a class and not get distracted by these, you know, these white politicians sort of trying to buy us off. They're not really even trying to buy us off. They just use whiteness. They're not even, I mean, in prior decades, they had to actually come up with some, you know, some stuff to give the white working class. Now they're not even bothering with that. They're just using the, you know, this assertion that, you know, white people have a common interest with their rulers. And so that, I think that's kind of where, that's how it breaks down in the US. And, you know, we gotta fight it everywhere it shows up. Part of it is, you know, we gotta make sure that these programs are not exclusive in class and race terms, and the way you do that is you make it universal and you make it high quality and well paid, because let's remember the workforce, not just the parents.
Totally. Do we have anyone on stack with a response? Okay, so our final question is another broad one. Is there anything we haven't talked about that didn't make it into the book that you think would be worth discussing?
Oh, wow, yeah, tons of things, but I mean, how do we get there? That's the one that I don't have an answer for, right? So that's, I mean, one of the things that DSA is doing is trying things, and we're finding, you know, we're winning some and we're losing some, but we're learning as we go along. And I think rather than like trying to lay out this beautiful blueprint of how we will be victorious in this way and then like change this word and that word and make it perfect, just jumping into the struggle is a really great way. Obviously not foolishly so you get your head handed to you, but jumping into it when you have like some sense of like, okay, this is definitely what most people want. How do we bring it out? I think that's the best way to learn our strengths, to get our organizing wrapped together, to figure out how to reach people that we haven't reached before. And you know, I mean, in New York, we've been doing a lot of electoral stuff, learning how to run an election, learning what the freaking budget process is in Albany. I mean, we had no idea until we had DSA people up there as elected officials. We had no idea what the scam this thing is. So, and even exposing that a little bit has been very effective. So we're learning just tons from doing things that I think the movement had not been doing before. So, and I am really excited about the idea that you all are doing the, you know, this childcare for all. You're going to learn so much, even if you don't win in the first round. You're going to learn tons about, you know, the power structure, how it works, how we can go against it, and you're going to have a core of people who all have gone through this experience who can like really design the next assault. I mean, it's just it's the best thing. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, and your book is helping us jump into the struggle. So I wanted to thank you again so much for writing it. It's so hard to find information on universal childcare and on the history of it in other countries. So you pulling it together has been definitely life-changing for me and for other people in our working group as well. So thank you so much, and thank you for your time tonight. Does anyone have any other responses or questions that they want to bring up? Yeah, I think we should all just give a round of applause for Jenny. Thank you so much, Jenny. I'll send you all the links when they're out. But this has been a wonderful discussion. It was a wonderful book. And I'll keep you up to date. Hopefully we win.
Yeah, it's great to meet you all, and yeah, definitely keep me up to date. And thanks so much for all your kind words. I really, you're exactly the audience that I was hoping for the book to have.
Thank you. All right, everybody. Have a good night. I'll see you soon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Night, y'all.
Good night. Scared if I end it, I'll lose the recording. Okay, Eric. So, oh wait. So actually, I won't, because then we'll have to cut it out. Bye.